Do grab a seat, and we will get going, because it's all about the future. I fear it when Don comes up.
Nope, you're
okay. Good. Okay, you're just going to remove stuff. That's fine. Just don't remove me. Good. OK, let's get going. So Robert's going to join us in a minute when he gets mic'd up. But I will kick it off. The first bit, this I think is the first piece of legal disclaimer we've had to put up these 2 days. And it's very simple. You should assume everything I say will change, and you shouldn't buy anything based on it, because it's not me promising you anything. That's the summary. OK, you can also read it out in full. The lawyers will tell me I've got to read it out in full. OK, I want to split this presentation into several pieces. They're the pink bubbles on the screen. One of them is very simply what you can do now, which is, of course, what you've actually been doing these past 2 days. Then, of course, we'll go into what's coming in the very near term, medium term, and then kind of more aspirational long term. The point here of splitting it up is clearly the stuff in the near term we're pretty much guaranteed to do in some sense, right? I'm not promising you, but I'm telling you it's more likely to be fully baked. Long term is really up for grabs. What we would like you to do is give us feedback on whether you think it's a good idea, what else we should add, what we should subtract. Key point is there are things in this presentation that the list is probably far too long for us to get done, all the things in this deck. Therefore, you need to help us prioritize them. And the reason that's important is because the things I will talk about are things that affect you when it comes to being a developer on Workspace. So this is how you can influence making your lives easy, or easier anyway. So first things first, customers, as much as they have lots of clever people in them, they are probably in many cases going to need a helping hand building some of this stuff. All right, so it might be they need help building a micro app. It might be they need help customizing a micro app or building a dip, etc. Customers needing help normally means they're willing to part with cash. Cash is a good thing for running a business. So this is why you should be interested. First things first, where will a customer kind of journey through? Okay, so start off, let's say we go in, we say, Workspace is wonderful, and they say, yes, I'm convinced. Right? Well, the first thing is, who in the organization is going to actually use it? Work that out, because then you're going to need to group them. The reason you want to group them is very simple. Grouping people means they use probably different apps, have different use cases, etc. So what do you do? Well, once you group them, you work out what those use cases are. Unsurprisingly, the next thing you do is, well, how do we satisfy those with which integrations they actually are going to need? By integrations, I'm being deliberately vague here. It may be dips, or it may be just micro apps on top of existing dips. All right, so once you've identified what things they need, presto, you get into actually configuring it, because, of course, when you deploy it, you actually make sure that you have, for example, configured the right URI as the base endpoint, and you've got the right permissions and the right OAuth, magic, and so on and so forth. And once you've done that, well, guess what? You keep turning the handle, because as they experience this, they will hopefully want more and more of these integrations, and life will be good. So the question these customers and you are going to need to ask is very simple. Are they going to use the things that are inbox or not? So, of course, you have inbox dips on the left there, and you've got inbox micro apps on the right. Those of you with very good memories from yesterday will notice those icons are the ones we used yesterday when Rado and I gave you the very first introduction. I don't expect you to remember that though. So you can use the inbox one. So they're going to need to configure those. All right? You may be able to help them with that. The next one, though, it may be that they need to customize some of those dips and micro apps. So they might want an extra micro app with some new fields in. You're going to have to customize the dip to add those fields, bring them in when you do that load tables action. So that's the green thing. Then we've got some orange stuff. Well, maybe they need completely bespoke dips. They have a weird legacy enterprise system that they need to build a new dip for, and of course associated micro apps. That's the orange one. Now, here is a catalog. Now, this is where you might go, you or the customer would go to the catalog and download those things and put them into their workspace. Now, of course, when you as developers are building dips and micro apps, you have two choices. You can keep them for yourself because they're special to that customer and unique, or you might decide to put them into the marketplace, or sorry, the catalog, should use the word marketplace, and therefore allow other people to get to them. All right, so there are these four different things you might be able to do. Clearly, the inbox is the blue one. Here they are again. The key point here of this slide is the blue line along the top is really consulting type of work, and I put into that configuration, etc. And what we've been doing yesterday and today has been more around, hey, how do we develop things for customers, and therefore, what do we sell them? Okay, so again, if you're trying to think about how to make money from this whole exercise that we've been going through, this is probably the summary way of doing it. Now, you remember yesterday we talked about, it only speaks JSON, this HTTP integration. Well, as you well know now, of course, if you stick something in the middle of it, this wrapping around a system with non-REST APIs, guess what? That's a development opportunity again. All right, so you may detect a little theme here around making money. So, now that we've done the now piece, let's talk about near term. I'm deliberately avoiding giving you absolute timescales here, by the way, but near term is kind of what you'd expect it to mean. So, when you're creating integrations, so dips and micro apps, clearly you want to be able to export them and give them to other people, right? And therefore, they need to be able to import them. Today, we have some APIs to do that. It's not in, I think there's pieces in the UI. It's not quite there yet. Clearly, we need this if we're going to have a catalog. We talked about this bespoke things that we're building. And so we intend to make this available both in the UI, so import, export, but also as an API. The API is already in there, I think. The point being there, you're able to get a script, pull down something, put in source control, etc., maybe promote from a test environment to a production environment. All right, so we're starting to think about how customers are going to manage the life cycle of, for example, micro apps. What else we got for you? We talked a little bit yesterday about on-prem and the need customers, I think, uniformly will have to patch in applications or systems from on-prem to Workspace in the cloud. We talked a little bit about that blue box there, the cloud connector that we will be bringing out kind of in tech preview form when we go GA with Workspace. And of course, if there's no web services API on that target system, then create that wrapper. In the future, so not now, but in the future, that wrapper might be able to be hosted on top of that blue box as well. And so from a customer's perspective, it may look slightly less scary than asking them to spin up a whole new kind of random server in their environment. You just say it's fine, it's a Docker container, it lives on that blue box. Next one, some of you will have found when you were working on your dips and micro apps over the past few hours, you'll have seen that there have been times you wanted to make a call to an API that depended on the results of a call you just made. And call chaining is unsurprisingly kind of important. There are a whole boatload of systems that it's pretty much required for. And so if we'd been lucky, we would have had that for the developer conference. We weren't quite lucky enough. So ask me in a few weeks' time, and that should be in there. So that is the near-term set of things that we're doing. I'll bring Robert up to do the medium-term piece. As we go through this, though, obviously, if you have questions, comments, do wave at us. We may even notice you. Also, use Slack. Somebody else will notice that. So do kind of feel free to interact rather than let us just spout roadmap at you and you're thinking this is complete rubbish. With that, we'll talk about medium term. And Robert is going to do that, I hope. Yes, he is. Good.
OK. Yes, you can hear me. That's great. So medium term, so we're looking a bit further into the future. The further you look into the future, the more uncertainty there is. That's how life is. So I guess I need to stand on the carpet, otherwise the cameras will complain. So first of all, you've all seen that it's possible to build integrations. It's possible to build micro apps. But basically, today it's only possible to import and export these separately. So you can import and export separate micro apps, separate integration configurations. But you can't import and export these as bundles, as solution bundles, as applications. So one of the things that we really, really want to do soon is basically allow the import and export of bundles, and also for you to include logos there, pictures there, so you can add branding and similar. So David spoke yesterday about race conditions. So you may have noticed with HTTP integrations, when you do an integration, when you, for example, would implement an expense approval, you get a notification into the system. On some points, the user will click approve for this expense. And now something might have changed in the target system. So for example, the expense might have been changed from $100 to $1,000. So there is a little gap there, which is there can be a race condition. So there's something that we need to implement, and that is basically test and set. So basically, before we write back to the target system, we need to check that still all the assumptions of the original notification are true. So that's another little thing to do and to improve on. So something else that you may have noticed is that we are basically reading from target systems with a service account. So that means if you have a service account that can read data for basically the entire organization, for the entire company, that's absolutely fine. But particularly new modern SaaS applications do only allow you to read basically the data of one particular user. So we know that we basically need to enable to read user-specific data as well. And we know once we enable this, we need to improve the mechanisms that we use for pulling in this data. So we can't just synchronize the data for every user. So Citrix is a very good example. If you basically try to go to a SaaS provider and try to synchronize 8,000 users, they would not be happy. So we need to improve the mechanisms. So what we have to do there is basically we need to enable mechanisms such as you can subscribe to events of the target system and just synchronize when you get an event that something has changed. So this will also make the solution more real-time, so you don't have to set a synchronization interval of like a minute. You get notified when there is a change. Something else that we really want to do is basically expose APIs. So we've now all seen the low-code, the graphical builder. It's a very powerful solution. But there is applications where it might be useful to inject basically notification cards and the plate contents, the detail view, directly into the system. So we're planning to add APIs for that. So the plan here is that we will do this using the so-called adaptive card standard. So that is an internet standard. So Microsoft are driving this heavily. Basically, you specify what contents you want to show to the user, and then it's up to the solution, so to Workspace, to render this in order to ensure a good user experience. So something that we're very keen on is if we're exposing these direct APIs, that still users maintain their configurability so that they can decide what notifications they want to expose to their users, that users can decide on what devices they want to receive a certain notification or not. In order to enable APIs on the platform, we want to basically implement standard mechanisms. So most modern APIs will be using OAuth2. We think we will need to use this too. In fact, we think we need to switch over the existing Citrix Cloud APIs to this platform. So basically, all Citrix Cloud APIs should be relying on OAuth2 in order to get authorization from users that we can make, that a third-party developer can make API calls on their behalf. Something else that we want to do as part of this is that not only the Workspace administrator, so the IT administrator, can grant privileges to an app, but also a Workspace user. So for example, if I want to make my Jenkins build send notifications to my Workspace notification feed, I should be able to do this. I should be able to grant my own app this permission. I don't need my IT administrator to do that. Something that you may have noticed, so we are unifying the experience for developers. So something we've done, we've started with the documentation. So you may have seen the portal at developer.cloud.com. So our API documentation is starting to get unified. Something else that we're doing here, more in the background, is we will be introducing an API gateway. So basically, that is a single entry point to use all Citrix Cloud APIs. The API calls behind this are unified. They look similar to the developer. They use a similar authentication or the same authentication mechanism. So there will be one Citrix API set rather than a product-specific flavor and different variable and parameter naming and similar. We understand today the low-code development experience is not as good as it can be, so there's a lot of little improvements that we can do. So we really appreciate the feedbacks that you've provided throughout this conference. So there's two particular areas that we want to improve. For one, usability. So we want to improve the builder experience so that it is possible to build faster and better micro apps. And the other one is that we want to enable versioning. So it should be possible to stage changes that are made within both the integration and the micro apps and to seamlessly revert them if they are not suitable. So yesterday we also had a breakout session on the virtual assistant. So we are planning to open up the virtual assistant to third-party developers. So third-party developers should be able to add intents. For example, I want the virtual assistant to understand a new question on my individual HR system or CRM system or whatever you like. And also it should be possible to link these intents then to the micro apps in order to be able to answer questions. And also something else that we want to do is we want to expose other assistants within the Workspace virtual assistant. So there's a trend for enterprise companies, so people like Oracle. Basically every enterprise company is creating its own assistants for its own systems. So we think we should be unifying this on our platform. Something that you may have noticed is sometimes it's necessary for API calls to be retried because a target system is overloaded. So we intend to implement retries. We know this is something that will need to be configurable by the end user. So that's another improvement that we do for the HTTP integration. Right, and it's back to David.
David needs to unmute his microphone. Okay, so that was the medium term. So now short term, medium term. Next comes, pink bubble says long term, right? It's very logical. So, something that people have asked about, I think, well, multiple times, including quite recently today on Slack, is around catalogs. My catalog has a U and a D, by the way, at the end. I'm not American. So what we would like to do is take the catalog that we want to produce as soon as possible and then take it one step further from being a public website also to being reflected inside the Citrix admin view. If you remember, if you hunted around a bit, when you were adding a new integration, you would have seen a sort of listing a bit like this. And those are the dips and micro app collections that you can add that are in box. Obviously, what we want to do is things that are in the catalog, we want to appear here as well in Citrix Cloud. And so I'm not saying it's going to be real soon now, but that's something that we're trying to get to such that when a customer admin goes to that view, they will be able to just go and click a button to enable whatever integrations you might have submitted to our public catalog. Something else, this kind of sounds a bit esoteric, it's not. Think of it as when you were trying to do the Jira integration, the field names and the tables you got back were probably not the most intuitive. Some of them make sense, like ID and priority. Some of them are a bit opaque. If we can enable people to create, if you like, aliases, friendly names, whatever you want to call them, for the fields, when you have somebody come to create a micro app, then they'll be able to much more easily understand what that field does because you, as the person who configured the integration or created the dip, will have been able to give it a friendly name to start with. So the last one here is important too, because if the underlying API changes and the field names change underneath, theoretically speaking, you could update that abstraction mapping and then the microapp would keep on working. And again, we talked about this yesterday from the point of view of microapp versioning and so on as well. That's why this is of importance. Next one, data transformation. So supposing you have an API call that returns a phone number, and you just want to get the area code and the rest of the phone number in two different fields of your microapp display page. It's very difficult to do today. You'd need to go and do it somewhere else, right? You need to create a service in between. What we'd like to do is enable you to have access to fairly basic, probably JavaScript, string functions, etc., so that you could do things like splitting or formatting or whatever it is to both cleanse data and indeed display it more to your liking. And so we're looking at what that might mean. Again, very early days on this. I appreciate your feedback in terms of what types of operations you think we should be able to provide you when it comes to, hey, I want to sort of clean up my data, transform it in some way on the way in. Another really important one, as much as Workspace is super important, we want everybody to use Workspace, right? We're also very much aware that some people will be living in, if you like, other platforms. And that's fine, right? So if you live in Microsoft Teams, we still want to add value to what you do and be able to embed things like the virtual assistant that Robert was talking about, or get your notifications feed into something like Teams will be possible if we allow you to do that embedding. And so the key point here is the intelligence we're giving you in Workspace isn't just in Workspace, it can also be put into other platforms as well, or at least will be. Okay, so meeting the user where they are is really, really important about this kind of Workspace experience rather than just Workspace is one web interface or mobile interface. Another one, again, needs a lot more fleshing out. How do you put some kind of UI widget into the Workspace? That's about as fleshed out as I have it at the moment. Clearly, there are examples like I want to say what my upcoming calendar events are. Now, of course, you can have reminders coming as notification cards. That's fine. But if I want a list of things that is sort of updated regularly but sits there so I can see the next 5, you need some kind of UI construct which is not a card. Clearly, more thought needed there. Feedback, obviously, would be very useful. We've talked about on-prem applications. This goes one step further because some customers will tell you that they are worried about their data going from on-prem or off-premises into the cloud. We did a survey on Slack yesterday where I think the majority of you said, yeah, that's not a problem at the moment. Maybe that's true, in which case, great. So again, this is up for grabs, right? But supposing they are uncomfortable, we will probably need to consider having that cache, that per tenant cache, might need to be sharded into pieces and have one cache per app on premises. There's all sorts of details there about, who owns the database where that cache lives. Is it the customer? Is it us? Where does it run? And so on. There's also, we talked about the event generation engine looking at the cache and being able to do that cross-system. We've just sharded the cache into multiple different places. How does that work? There's all sorts of interesting questions and complications here. Again, it will come down to how much demand there is for this and how far that pendulum needs to swing. Okay, so we have done all the forms of time now, right? Now, near term, medium term, and long term. So all that remains for me to do is to finish up, really, and I'll take questions in a minute and hopefully comb through Slack. So this slide is really, it's almost as a memory test because there's not enough space to put all the words, so you have to remember what the icons meant. I don't think I'm going to give a prize to anybody who remembers all of them, mainly because I think it's impossible and I haven't got a prize. But suffice it to say, if you're looking for the one slide that summarizes the entire deck, this is it. In all seriousness, the things at the beginning, import, export, call chaining, retry, and on-prem, see, I can do this. Those are the ones that I think are most baked. Obviously, give us feedback on those. But the medium term and the long term are the ones we're really saying, we're not going to do all of those real soon. We need your help in understanding which ones are the most important. So use the Slack poll. Give us that feedback. With that, we are into question time. I'm going to hope that Don's going to put up the Slack channel. Yeah. Yes? No? I can see there's active. Oh. Can I have it on the key monitor as well so I can read it? Otherwise, I look like an idiot. More than I do already. OK, so can we get a copy of this deck? Yes, you can. That was easy. JSON transformation, it'd be nice to support the velocity template language. It might be, I don't know. Who knows velocity template language? Alex, you're the person who mentioned this. Does anybody else know what we're talking about? Why would this be good, Alex?
It's just it's a standard. It's supported in a lot of other existing API gateways.
Got it. So it's supported by a lot of other existing API gateways for presumably transformation.
Yeah, request and response transformation.
OK, understood. Preston, can you speak to the AI ML abilities of the workspace? Robert's wandered off. I don't know what that means. I need a microphone. OK, so can I speak to them? Preston, can you tell me what you're looking for?
There were questions around, you mentioned yesterday.
We got a microphone coming to you. Just give it 1 sec.
Omar and Robert are fighting over the microphone at the moment, so I'm not sure. We used to have more microphones.
Yesterday, you talked about the abilities to get the relevant notifications and things. Can you articulate sort of what goes into that machine learning? What's the AI behind that? How is what capabilities are there today, and how will that be changing in the future?
I'm going to caveat heavily by saying I am not the expert here. The other thing I will tell you is that the analytics breakout that we did yesterday, if you didn't make that, that's a good one to go and look up. Beyond that, I'm going to look at Jay, and he can feel free to shake his head if he's, Oh, David's here. Right,
Yeah,
David.
that's fine. I can take this. So the way we do the notifications, we feed the metadata about notifications in our analytics engine. So essentially, we have a data lake of a lot of the notifications that are associated to a given user. And we apply machine learning algorithms today to do the relevancy ranking. Initially, we're going to do this ourselves. So we're going to iterate on models to kind of improve the relevancy and to be able to essentially drive different profiles to improve the personalization. I think eventually we may have an opportunity to open that up, but first we need to mature our infrastructure and do this ourselves. Eventually, I think we may want to have a mechanism by which we can provide vertical, the same way we want to do it for bot skills, right? Essentially intent detection skills. We may have an opportunity to create relevancy skills or relevancy models that we can have third-party plug into, but that's longer-term roadmap. So today, we have the infrastructure for the aggregation, we have the infrastructure for the machine learning models, and we're keeping this internal for a little while. And that gives us an opportunity to open it up down the road, but that's kind of where we are.
Cool. OK. Martin says, are the debug tools in the near term? So there is more and more debugging being built in. So I think there's some that has actually been built that wasn't in the build you got. So yes, there are going to be more. What I would say is the specifics of, hey, I want this particular type of debugging would be really helpful to stick in that Slack channel as a kind of crowdsourced thing. Because as much as we've been building integrations and we think this debugging will be good, you've been, 100 people here have been actively trying to use this thing, and you will have found things you wanted. So let us know.
So something that we will definitely do first is basically expose what exactly was returned for an API call, and basically how did the system take it, what return code was it, and similar. So some of these functionalities are already in newer builds, but we didn't have it here yet.
OK. Martin also says, any plans to share prioritization of what we're doing in connector land? So the GA should contain about 100, et cetera, et cetera. Just to be clear on that, so the GA builds, you've got to be careful what you're counting. There are dips and there are micro apps, OK? And sometimes we're a bit sloppy when we talk about integrations or connectors. So being specific now, dips means how many SORs you're talking to. At GA, there are going to be 13-ish, maybe a few more. Micro-apps, there will be over 100, I think a lot more than 100 actually. Obviously, those 100 plus micro-apps are split across those different dips, okay? In terms of what we're doing next, yes, we actually will share it. One of the things we're doing at the moment is actually working on what exactly that roadmap looks like. So I have like the next 10, but we need to be much crisper about what the next 50 are, all right? So I don't have that next 50 list at the moment, still in discussion.
I also want to be clear that basically Citrix will only be able to create a small part of these connectors. The majority will have to come from you guys, from external developers. So we will do the obvious ones, but basically everything else has to come from external developers.
Scott, you need a microphone, which we've successfully lost. Omar. Scott, there, sorry.
Is there going to be any mechanism for, I guess, syncing up with partners in terms of the dips that you guys are looking at, so we're not double handling that?
Yeah, so in other words, let's make sure we don't reinvent the wheel. Yes, I mean, what we're going to do obviously is things like this and other events too, we'll be talking about what the roadmap is in terms of dips. I think the other one I'd like to consider doing, this is not a promise, right? But I'd love to get to the point where we have a sort of coming soon type of thing in the catalog. I know in Sappho days, certainly we had that. So that might be one way of doing it. Yes. Right, we've got a couple more questions on Slack. So Brian says, ability to create service actions without the requirement of having a table in advance. Do you want to take that?
Yes, definitely. That is something, that is a bug we want to fix.
Oh, that was easy. Okay, Edward says, can we deploy Workspace intelligence in other cloud providers like not Azure? What about Chinese language integration? Ooh, okay, so deploying to other cloud providers, right? Citrix is running this service, so it's our infrastructure. We've chosen to run it on Azure. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. I don't think there's any reason to particularly. Obviously, correct me if you think there's a important reason. If you really mean, can we have the Workspace service in China and therefore it needs to run on a Chinese cloud, then I understand the question. I don't think we have I don't think I can share anything right now on that. Now, in terms of Chinese language integration, so localizing things into multiple languages, yes, absolutely. I don't know whether Chinese is coming, and David may have more on that.
Yeah, I'm just curious, is the question around targeting the Chinese market?
Yes, it's
Okay.
about the Chinese market and also for the grid firewall, that every time you have to go across the grid firewall, you will take more than 100 milliseconds latency. So just to avoid that, they will put the things on their own clouds, Alibaba and Sandovation.
Yeah. I think that's a bigger question in terms of, will Citrix run a bunch of xCloud services for China specifically? It's a good question. I don't have an answer at the moment. But yes, I completely agree with you. If you want to be in China, you've basically got to be inside. OK. Is the platform multi-tenant or single-tenant, says Richard? Depends on which bit you're talking about, is the answer. So if you have the cache, for example, that's single-tenant. If you have the Workspace platform as a whole, so for example, Athena, which is the piece that does all the auth, clearly that's not single-tenant. So by all means, ask a question. If you want a particular thing about, if you have a particular concern about, is this thing single-tenant, multi-tenant, stick it on Slack, we can reply. The answer is, that question is, it depends. OK, can we get detailed info regarding the Azure Functions breakout we saw yesterday? Yes, Alan will be happy to give you detailed information because he knows what he was talking about.
Says Alan.
He's waving at the back. It's that man there.
So you can talk to him now, but some things that we will definitely do is basically take the sessions and try to get them out there on video.
Yeah. Yes.
Can we get a microphone?
But we need Omar to run.
Thank you. It's more of a feedback for the user UI components that we have in the current state. It's very good, but it'll attract business audience to and encourage them to use it if you have a bulk upload or capability, which is very useful for some of the things that I'm working with the business for as a developer. So if you can put it in the short term or in the mid-term goals, or things. It'll be great.
So when you say bulk uploader,
Like an browse select feature in the list of UI components that we have. So currently we have text, like single, it's all based on single request thing, right?
Okay.
It'll be great if you have the option to do a bulk.
So file upload. In
Yeah,
bulk.
file
Okay.
upload template. So in the backend we can call a bulk load API
Okay.
and work on it. So
yeah, good feedback.
thank you.
Okay, Slack has dried up at the moment. So anything else? No, it has dried up. Anything else in the room? Any other burning questions? Otherwise, we have John, who will come up in a minute and talk to you about a little bit more about how to make money and also about the catalog piece, which I know is a burning question. But any other questions on roadmap, future plans, ideas? Give us feedback.
One more over here.
One more there. Alex, I think, right?
One thought that occurred to me was with the packs that you might buy with an existing dip or an existing integration, there might be a wizard for going through the setup of it that doesn't require you to have details. Is there any plan for that?
Great idea. We should definitely look at that. All right, Preston says Slack will never dry up, so good. I'm glad to hear you're all going to be typing rubbish in there for as long as possible. Rado says webinars. Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that we will cover a little bit later today is, hey, this is not the end, right? We are going to keep, we want to keep actually engaging with you, getting the feedback, telling you what's new, finding out what it is you need in order to develop stuff. So yes, we will do updates. Stay tuned on that.